Hello, good evening. Welcome to our Tech Tuesday. As we start a new series tonight, we are going to be covering the part of the business or the part of what I do on a daily basis. And that is dealing with people's bones and bone health. We think bones are these rigid things that make up the 10 posts in our body that keep all the rest of it standing upright and moving around. There's a little bit more to bones than just that. Bones are flexible and they can be healthy or unhealthy. So I'm going to share my screen and go through a presentation that I found. I borrowed quite heavily from a source in the UK, which is proving to be quite a good source these days because I've borrowed a couple of things from them. That. And shrink me down over here. And we're talking about bone health through life. And obviously that starts in the womb, where little skeleton forms. And even though it's quite soft and flexible when it's born, our bodies come out fully fledged and have a complete skeleton with all the bones in it. In fact, there's more bones when you're born than there are later on in life, but we'll get into that at a later stage. And they need to keep us upright as we go through life. And if you've never looked at what your bones look like underneath the skin, that is an X-ray of a baby's foot. Bone is a living tissue from which substances are constantly being removed and replaced. So if you think of bones like coral, and in fact, they are even doing that these days. They're using coral for maxillofacial repairs because coral is the closest thing to human bone, and the muscles and the blood vessels and things can grow through it and attach to it, and your body doesn't reject it. So coral is pretty much like bone, and bone is pretty much like coral. Healthy bone is strong and does not break easily. Although the number of people I've seen this week, they obviously don't have too many healthy bones because there's a lot of broken bones all of a sudden this week. During childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood, large amounts of calcium and other substances are added to the bone, strengthening the skeleton as it develops. Bone acts as a reserve for calcium in the body. And it's been said before that the skeleton is the safe or the storage area for calcium. And this is what happens to ladies who are pregnant, is that if baby is not getting sufficient calcium for his developing skeleton from mom's diet, it's going to take it from mom's bank, namely her skeleton. Bone is continuously being remodeled. An old bone tissue is replaced by new. So should you be in the unfortunate state of having a fracture or broken bone, it doesn't matter how old or how young you are, your bone is going to be replaced and it's going to regrow. Bone formation and bone resorption or replacement of old bone tissue take place throughout life, although at different rates at different times. Obviously, the younger you are, the quicker you heal. So a child who is about a year old, if they break a bone for whatever reason, they're going to heal in time period of roughly about a week, sometimes about 10 days. You or I are going to heal in about 6 weeks, 6 to 7 weeks. If you're osteoporotic, it's going to take about 8 weeks. When my mother fractured her wrist a number of years ago, she was told 1 day per year of age is how long it takes your bone to heal. I can't verify that, so I'm not going to argue on that, but that'll give you a pretty good idea of how long it'll take your bone to heal. But heal it will. In childhood, the process enables the bone to grow. In adulthood, the purpose is to maintain bone strength. In childhood, you're having old bone tissue being replaced with new bone tissue continuously and all the time. And often you'll find that kids who go through a sudden growth spurt will complain about painful joints. And that is often known as growing pains because they're growing so fast that their bone is battling to keep up. Bone formation and bone resorption are influenced by a variety of factors, including diet and physical activity. Peak bone mass is reached when someone is in their mid-20s, and we're talking around about 25. Around this age, bone is at its strongest. After this age, bone mass gradually decreases. Achieving a good peak bone mass is important in reducing the risk of osteoporosis in later life. And all of us, every single person alive, is going to develop osteoporosis at some stage. And you're going to develop arthritis at some stage. It all depends on your activity levels, your diet, and a lot of it has to do with genes as well, to be quite honest. So some of those factors you can't control, others you can. And this is because bones are stronger before bone loss begins. Peak bone mass can be increased by ensuring that the diet contains adequate amounts of vitamin D and calcium during childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood, and by regular activity, especially weight-bearing activities such as brisk walking, running, dancing, and climbing stairs, in which the bones bear body weight. And one of the things that they've found is that these guys that spend an extended periods of time in space, like on the space station, they often end up with problems with their bones weakening by the time they get back to Earth. So they've got to go through quite a strict exercise regime once they're back down here under gravity in order to regain their bone strength. And they take quite a few supplements as well to maintain the bone or calcium in their bones while they are in space. Because obviously in space, you can't do weight bearing because there is no weight, because there's no gravity. Peak bone mass is influenced by genetic factors such as build and ethnic group. So you'll notice if you look at people, if you've made a study of people, you will see that some people are a lot more heavy boned than others. Some people, some quite large people have got quite thick bones underneath their skin. And others who are a little bit more delicate have got quite thin bones, and they often end up with problems earlier in life than those with the thicker bones. Strong bones that contain plenty of calcium are less likely to become weak and break in old age. And bone strength is affected by genetic factors. Some ethnic groups may have stronger bones in general than others. Gender, men tend to have a greater bone mass than women. And bone strength is affected by diet, namely calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin K, in particular, are important for strong bones. Regular exercise, especially weight-bearing exercise, is important for strong bones as well. So we're not saying that you have to go to the gym and lift the heaviest weights you can find on a daily basis. Just your own body weight works quite well. So doing a few push-ups, a few squats, you can make your own weights at home. Take a couple of like 5-liter jugs of water and lift them. That's a weight-bearing exercise. If you want to, lift them and walk. I've seen some people put a little broom handle between 2 bottles and lift them up. So you don't need 5 liters of water. You can use 2 liters of water. Down here on the South Coast, sadly, a lot of people unintentionally get this weight-bearing exercise because we often have water issues, and large areas of the coast are often without water. And these people now have to carry buckets or bottles of water on a daily basis. So inadvertently, they are actually getting some good exercise. Body weight. Heavier people have stronger bones because the bones respond to the weight that they have to carry. Hormones. Irregular or loss of menstrual periods can cause bone loss. In other words, during menopause. And this is why it's so important for ladies who are going through menopause to have a calcium supplement and to do as much exercise as possible to try and maintain that bone strength for as long as possible. Diet is an important factor in forming healthy bones. An adequate calcium intake at all stages of life, coupled with an active lifestyle, helps to ensure that bones are as strong as possible. So those who have had did a lot of sport in the early days will have better bone strength. And this is part of the reason why I'm so keen on things like parkrun. Please note, you don't have to run parkrun, but if you can go and walk parkrun, you're getting your exercise, you're getting your fresh air, you're getting your vitamin D from the sunshine, and you're getting your weight-bearing exercise because you're simply using your own body weight to strengthen your bones, specifically your hip bones. It is particularly important during childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood when bones are developing. The richest sources of calcium in the UK diet are milk and dairy products. And there's a bit of a debate about this because obviously we all know that calcium is found in milk. Calcium is also found in a lot of vegetables as well as meat. And there is the debate that if you have too much milk, it's going to make you fat, specifically full cream milk. It's not. But the milk sugars can cause other problems. And if you have too much milk, specifically the milk that we're having today, which is pasteurized and sterilized, and there's all sorts of funny stuff that they inject into the cows in a lot of cases, specifically growth hormones, which are going into you as well. Therefore, you're going to end up with problems. So be careful of milk and dairy products. They are good for you, but be careful of the sources. So the best source of milk, in my opinion, is raw, free-range cow's milk. But to try and find that is extremely difficult. When we first moved into our house here, there was a farm just up the road from us that had a couple of Jersey cows, and I would go up there on a Saturday morning and get some fresh milk, unpasteurized, straight from the factory. And that milk came out yellow. When you drink that sort of milk, compared to the milk that you get in the shops, milk that you get in the shops is pretty much white water in comparison. Sorry, these controls keep floating up over here. So an adequate intake of calcium is important throughout life. Dairy products such as milk, yogurt, and cheese are all good sources of calcium. In the UK, white and brown flour must be fortified with calcium, so bread made from these flours is a significant source for many people as well. Pulses, nuts, dried fruit, and green vegetables such as spinach also provide calcium, as does fish, which is eaten with the bones, such as canned sardines. Some foods may provide significant amounts of calcium, but also contain substances that reduce the amount that can be absorbed by the body. Examples of these substances include phytates in whole grain cereals and pulses, and oxalate in spinach and rhubarb. As vegans do not eat dairy products, they should make sure that their diet contains sufficient calcium. In the UK, many soya products such as tofu and soya drinks are fortified with calcium, and so can also be useful sources. Adults need at least 700 milligrams per day, and our Dr. Jim McAfee has said that women of childbearing age or who are pregnant are needing upwards of about 1,200 milligrams per day. individuals taking osteoporotic medication may benefit from an intake of 1,000 milligrams a day. And when they talk about that in this particular format, that while it sounds like a heavy dose, is usually non-chelated calcium carbonate, not a chelated calcium glycinate. And that usually is just calcium on its own. The best sources are milk that includes soya, yogurt, and I will say raw Greek yogurt, not the sweetened ones, cheese, bony fish, greeny leafy vegetables, amongst other things. And vitamin D assists in the absorption of calcium from food, which is why when you look at our calcium supplement, you'll see that there's calcium plus magnesium plus vitamin D, all working together for best absorption. Some vitamin D is acquired from the diet, but for most people, the major source is through synthesis in skin that is exposed to sunlight. Just this much of skin being exposed to sunlight is not enough. You're looking at a good 50 to 60% of your body or of your skin being exposed for at least half an hour a day to be able to get sufficient vitamin D into your system. As well as being important for the bone health, good vitamin D status has been recently shown to be a factor in the prevention of falls amongst older people. In other words, it helps with balance. And I quite often see older people, especially older ladies, it's not often that you see older gentlemen, but mostly older ladies, who will tell you that they were working in the garden or they tripped over a step, they stumbled, fell and broke their hip. And sadly, if you researched it and went backwards, which it's almost impossible to do, but in a lot of cases, the reason that they stumbled was because the neck of the femur had already broken. And then they fell, so they put the fall towards the fracture, whereas the fracture actually happened and was then obviously exaggerated by the fall. A deficiency of vitamin D over a long period of time causes rickets in children and osteomalacia in adults. And osteomalacia is a softening of the bones, exactly the same as rickets. I also know it as Blount syndrome, which I find quite often in young, specifically Black children, usually, sadly, also very overweight. So their skeletons can't handle their body weight. And people with darker skins don't tend to absorb vitamin D quite as easily from sunlight as people with paler skins. So a black skin will generally not absorb as much vitamin D as a white skin, even if they've got the same amount of skin exposed for the same length of time. And that's why it's always good to fortify the diet with a supplement if you believe that you're not getting sufficient vitamin D. Most people obtain sufficient vitamin D through sunlight exposure during the summer months. But the further north you travel, and we're talking north of the equator, not this side of the equator, but the further north of the equator that you travel, the less vitamin D people get, and the more depression you get, and the more fractures you get. But some groups, such as those with darkly pigmented skin, living at higher altitudes or latitudes, housebound people, and those who wear clothes that cover most of their body, for example, for religious reasons, we're talking Muslims specifically, are more reliant on dietary supply and may need supplements of the vitamin to ensure adequate status. And this is where they discovered the shortage of vitamin D, I think was firstly in Australia. I'm under correction on that one, but Australia is known as the sun capital of the world because, almost like South Africa, they get a lot of sunshine over there, but they also get a lot of skin cancer over there. And people are focused so heavily on the skin cancer that they always covered up. So when they go outside, they've got big brimmed or wide brimmed hats over their heads, they're wearing sunglasses, they've got scarves, they've got long sleeve clothing on, to try and protect their skin from the sunshine. But unfortunately, they're not protecting their body from vitamin D. So they're losing out big time on vitamin D, which is so very, very important to a lot of other factors or systems in the body. So in other countries like Germany, where there's a lot of cloud cover, and as I said, those furthest away from the equator, north, in the northern hemisphere, often end up with problems as well as those like the Muslims, for instance, or people who are often covered up quite heavily. And this is because few foods contain large quantities of vitamin D. So it is important to get that exposure to sunshine. Fish liver oils have very high levels of vitamin D, and oily fish such as sardines, mackerel, and fresh tuna are also rich sources. But think about it. How often do you get these sorts of fish? And how often are you getting the fish from the cold waters so that you can get the correct levels? Egg yolk, liver, and butter contain smaller amounts of vitamin D. And one of the things that has been advertised quite a bit before, there's a certain margarine. Please stay away from margarine, in my opinion. But you'll see that some of the margarines are advertised as having extra vitamin D added to it. Sadly, most of that is synthetic. Many low-fat spreads and some breakfast cereals are also fortified voluntarily, as is skimmed milk powder. The recommended nutrient intake, or RNI, proposed by the Scientific Committee on Nutrition for all people aged 4 and above is 10 micrograms per day. The SACN have also produced supplementation advice. Between late March, early April, and September, we're talking Northern Hemisphere here, the majority of people aged 5 years and above will probably obtain sufficient vitamin D from sunlight when they are outdoors, alongside foods that naturally contain or are fortified with vitamin D. So this is the Northern Hemisphere summer, and obviously you can have the reverse here in the Southern Hemisphere when through our summer months where people are more likely to be outside actively exercising and then having fishing and that sort of thing. As such, they might choose not to take a vitamin D supplement during these summer months. From October to March, everyone over the age of 5 will need to rely on dietary sources of vitamin D. So in winter, please up your vitamin D intake in supplement form. In summer, you can probably safely not have it quite as often. Since vitamin D is found only in a small number of foods, it might be difficult to get enough from foods that naturally contain vitamin D and or fortified foods alone. So everyone should consider taking a daily supplement containing 10 micrograms of vitamin D. There are further recommendations that people with very little or no sunshine exposure and people from minority ethnic groups with dark skin should take a daily supplement containing 10 micrograms of vitamin D throughout the year. And those who have no or little sunshine exposure would include people who are working inside all day. And I think specifically from my perspective of the nursing staff, they're working 12-hour shifts. And in winter, in some parts of the country, when they go on duty, it's dark. When they go off duty, it's dark. They don't see sunshine enough. All breastfed infants of 0 to 1 years, as a precaution, it is recommended that infants from birth to 1 year of age, whether exclusively or partially breastfed, should be given a daily supplement containing 8.5 to 10 micrograms of vitamin D. And if they're being breastfed, I would suggest they get it via mom. infants fed infant formula should not be given a vitamin D supplement unless they are receiving less than 500 mils of formula a day. And that is because virtually all formulas have been fortified with vitamin D. All children aged from 1 to 4 years of age should be given a daily supplement containing 10 micrograms of vitamin D. And you will notice that our vitamin D, our vegan D, is an extremely small tablet that I'm pretty sure anybody can chew or swallow regardless of age without fear of choking. There are at least 3 vitamin K dependent proteins present in bone. People with osteoporosis have been shown to have low blood levels of vitamin K, and low vitamin K intake and impaired vitamin K status are associated with lower bone mass and higher risk of hip fracture in older men and women. The main sources of vitamin K are leafy green vegetables, meat, and dairy products. So there again, we'll notice that our vegans, while they're getting good sources of it from the leafy green vegetables, they're not getting it from the meat and the dairy. So osteoporosis is, as a person gets older, some loss of calcium from bone is normal, but severe loss results in gaps in the structure of bone. And if you look at this little picture over here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this little one here to the left is healthy bone. And if you cut through healthy bone, it should look like the inside of a crunchy chocolate. You know, the chocolate with the yellow honeycomb. It's crunchy chocolate, and that is what a healthy bone should look like. Osteoporotic bone, on the other hand, looks like the inside of an aero chocolate, so much bigger bubbles, which then obviously cause it to be weaker. So this causes the bones to become weak, brittle, and to break easily, because technically speaking, to break a bone actually takes some hard work, because your bone should be flexible like a tree branch. And if it becomes weak, brittle, and breaks too easily, that is then known as osteoporosis. Osteo meaning bone, porosis meaning porous or holy, basically. All bones can be affected by osteoporosis, but fractures are most common in the wrist, back, and hip. Osteoporosis is most frequently affects older women who have gone through menopause, but it can affect men and younger women. And we're now starting to see much younger people suffering from osteoporosis, not just the elderly. Now, what is osteoporosis? So this is what your bone looks like under a microscope, by the way. So the bone on the left is healthy bone, and the bone on the right is osteoporotic. I'm just worried that I don't go too far over here. I think I'm going to stop right here and continue with this next week, because we've got about 6 minutes left. Oops, where's my video over here? So I want to get in a little bit more involved in osteoporosis and the dietary supplements accordingly. So does anybody have any comments or questions before I stop recording?